Hi everyone, thanks for joining the Marketing Brand Google Apps Hangouts on Air. My name is Ashley and I work on the Google Apps Partner Marketing team and I work globally across regions. So regardless of the region you're in, I probably serve you if you are a reseller or a partner of Google Apps. So today, as I said before, I'm covering the Google Apps Branding Guidelines. And this is a topic that comes up quite frequently amongst our partners. And so we thought this was a great way to interact with you and answer any of your questions that you may have. So I'm not going to go through a formal presentation. I'm going to go through some live demos and websites and branding guidelines that we have available for you because I want this to be engaging and interactive. And so to help me get there, please ask any of your questions that you have on the right side of your screen if you have the Q&A app enabled. So I can see a couple of you have already put in some questions, which is great. So I'll get to those at the end of the chat or the presentation. Also, we're going to be posting this Hangout on Air to GEC, so you can share this with any of your teammates if they weren't able to join, or if you'd like to revisit this content again, which I hope you definitely do. So today, I'm going to go over the branding material that we have on GEC to help you bolster your brand and your image. Secondly, we're going to go over the official Google branding and permissions page. So those are a lot of the friendly T's and C's that we have, but it's a good resource for you anytime you have any questions about your own brand and whether or not you're violating anything with Google. Third, I'm going to talk about some best practices to market your brand without violating our marketing policies. And then lastly, go over your Q&A. So again, please ask your questions on the right side of the chat screen, and I will get to those as soon as we're done. So first, we're talking about the branding material available on GEC. So I hope most of you have already logged into GEC at some point or another, and if you haven't yet, then this will be a great way to introduce you and give you a little bit of a preview of what's to come there. So I'm going to share my screen. You're probably going to see a dozen of me come up in a second. All right, here we go. Let's see if this is correct. Perfect. So for those of you who haven't been to GEC, and for those who have but may have not seen this before, we do have a scrolling carousel gadget on our top marketing section of GEC. There are three main principles that we want you to keep in mind, which is keep it simple, make it yours, and show it accurately. And if you've noticed, through each of the blue buttons below, we have these three topics and themes all throughout the site. And we have do's and don'ts for each kind of marketing activity that we see most commonly amongst our partners. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to dig into build your website because I personally think that this is one of the first initiatives that you should tackle whenever you're starting a business, building your marketing, and establishing your brand. So as you can see here, we have keep it simple, make it yours, and show it accurately. And under each of these themes, you can click on the images below, and you'll see a lot of do's and don'ts when it comes to building your website. So if you go back to the marketing home screen, we have creating an event, driving online ads, and all of these three topics are going to change with the do's and don'ts that are most appropriate. So, for example here, if you create a website and you want to know what should I do and what should I not do to make sure that I'm compliant with Google Apps and our branding policies. So here are all the do's and don'ts. One of the most egregious things that I see most commonly occurring is that people are constantly manipulating the Google Apps icons that we create. Now, I don't want to deter you from being creative with your own logo and your own brand, but try to stay within the branding guidelines so that we can uphold our reputation. So speaking of name and reputation, Google's very widely recognized and well known around the world, as I'm sure all of you know. And the marketing and PR team are especially proud of this because we work hard to uphold and protect that brand. It takes years and years, a big team, a big staff, a lot of time and resources to get there. So as an extension of us, we want to grant you, our partners, with that same brand to leverage to your customers because it's important for your customers to know that we as Google are giving you our stamp of approval. And we know you've worked hard to get to this point, so we want you to make sure that you're gaining all the benefits from the Google brand. But because we invest so much time and effort into maintaining this brand, we want to make sure that you're also using it widely, and that's why we're here talking about brand, and that's the goal of the Hangout on Air today. So if you click next on these buttons, you'll go back to Make It Yours. Again, if you want to go to Previously, Keep It Simple, or Next, Show It Accurately, you'll see all of these here. Again, one of the examples that I see happening a lot is people not including Google icons and products that they actually don't represent or sell. It's very important to us that if you're only selling, let's say, Google Apps and Google Search and Cloud Platform, that those are the only icons that you're showing. Please do not put up other competitors' icons such as Dropbox, or sometimes we've seen people sell Google Wallet, but that is actually not possible. So if you do sell Google Wallet, that would be very interesting, and you can let us know how you do that. But for the apps and products that you sell, please make sure those are the ones that are on your website. All right. I'm going to pick one more topic so that you could see another example of how we have the 3 topics shown throughout this initiative. So I'm going to go to increase your PR and social, because after building your website, I think increasing your PR and social is the second most common and most, let's say, lucrative initiative to tackle when you're building a business in terms of time and resources invested. Because I think once you have your PR and your social really strong and you have a great foundation, you have a lot of reach, you have a voice, and you have presence with people who are looking at you from your website. And you can branch off and hyperlink your associated PR and social media handles from there. So if you want to create a case study, which I highly encourage you to do if you haven't done so already, and many people have multiple case studies showing off different industries and different customers they work with. It shows legitimacy, and it shows credibility. So if you have a lot of different case studies on your website, as a customer, I would definitely want to talk to you before I would talk to your, another competitor down the street who really has no experience, or at least on their website. So if you have a case study, you should absolutely, or if you have opportunities to write a case study, you should absolutely invest in that. So if you click on the images under Keep It Simple, you'll see the do's and don'ts here. So one of the do's that we have is highlight key stories and customer wins with clean pictures, messages, and real partner examples. I can't stress this enough, because when you have stock photos or just small quotes from customers, it doesn't really lend a story, or doesn't really create a picture. So the more color you can add to this story, the more it's going to resonate with your customers. Then it has this. We have the same structure and format under Make It Yours, shown here, as well as Show It Accurately. The reason that we did do's and don'ts with associated images and pictures was before we had a long, heavy, almost textbook-like list of branding guidelines, and it felt like we were back in school. So we wanted to make this fun and in googly fashion have lots of colors and pictures to make branding guidelines a little less intimidating and a lot friendlier. So you may also have noticed that within each of these tools we have Twitter here, and then on the previous number 3 we had Google+. So make sure you look at those finite details and give us any feedback on these branding guidelines also if you haven't done so already. So with that, I'm going to move on to another resource that is particularly useful when you want the black and white, literally, guidelines directly from Google. So good. You could see my screen here. On this site, if you go to google.com/permissions, then you will see, let's go here, then you will see the homepage of getting permission to use Google's brand features. Now it has many topics such as trademarks, using our logos, using our, product graphics. So I'm going to go back to trademarks. Where was that before? There we go, trademarks and rules. So this is a great resource if you want to know what exactly can or can I not do. How do I get trademarks for, let's say, getting whitelisted for AdWords? I know that commonly is a request from our partners, and if you want that, this is a great plug. If you do want to get whitelisted for Google AdWords, all you need to do is go into your reseller console and fill out a request to your channel manager, give them your customer ID number, and then request to be whitelisted. And once someone responds back to you, it should only take about 24 to 48 hours to get that settled. But I do want to point out one of the things that I commonly see partners violate, and that's such a heavy word, very strong, and I don't want to scare anybody or make this an intimidating thing, but we do take the Google brand very seriously. And the third to the bottom bullet, do not use Google trademarks as second or third level domains, is very important to us. Over the past few weeks, we've seen a lot of people putting Google Apps within their domain. So for example, if they say Google Apps Taiwan.com, that is definitely a violation of our brand, because that's you representing Google Apps, but it's also masking the fact that it does look like it's coming straight from Google. As a partner and as a reseller of Google, we encourage you to create your own brand, but it's very important that you establish your own identity and not rely so heavily on Google at the same time. So we have issued some official requests from our legal team. We have had formal and official deauthorization letters, so we don't want that to happen to any of you. So please make sure that this is not falling within your scope or realm. And if you see other people violating this, please let us know. We do want to make sure that we handle these appropriately. So if you have any questions on the official google.com permissions site, please let me know, or type in your question on the right-hand side of your screen. All right, and now on to best practices to market your brand without violating policies. I'm going to go back to GEC because I will probably reference this quite a bit. So one of the biggest questions that I ask myself whenever I'm trying to market Google or trying to market Google Apps is, if such and such, or if fill in the blank happened to my brand, would it look bad to a customer? Or would it look good to a competitor for any reason that's a red flag? Now, this is really important, because if you're talking about email marketing campaigns or you're doing logos for an event, would the way that you're speaking, would your logos, would the way you're representing yourself look bad, or would it make your reputation or your brand vulnerable? So once you ask this question, then you could decide, yes, let's move forward, or no, let's tweak this copy a little bit. One of the things that it's hardest for me to create copy. So to be concise, clean, simple, and still googly, professional, and friendly is a really hard balance to strike, especially since I just rattled off about 6 different adjectives. As long as you establish your voice and keep it consistent, that is what's most important. So try to keep it simple and stay consistent. Second, talk about your brand with pride. And we do this all the time at Google. I think sometimes it's easier to fall into or work for a company that already has an established reputation, which is great. But if you're building yours from the bottom up, it's not a daunting task, so don't be afraid. Take pride in your brand and make sure that you never apologize for wanting to protect it. This is a stance that's hard for us to uphold sometimes, because we want our partners to be creative. We want to be friendly towards them, and we want to have an open relationship. But if you see somebody misrepresenting or misusing your brand, it is very important to say, no, this needs to stop, and we have very good justification for it. And lastly, keep your logo and company name present at all times. When you're trying to establish, let's say, a new product, or let's say a new feature that's coming out, this isn't going to have recognition overnight. And even with a company like Google, you need a lot of PR and a lot of marketing to make something as widespread as you want it to be. So keep your logo and your company name or whatever product or feature you're presenting on all of your collateral, on your email signatures, your brochures, your events. Anytime you're speaking to a customer, with, let's say, face to face in a sales meeting. Every time you can represent yourself, I highly encourage you to do so. Always have those business cards out and make sure that you're representing yourself appropriately and as often as possible. So I wanted to leave a lot of time for Q&A because I think that's where there's a lot of interaction and engagement. So I want to talk to you guys as much as possible. So, okay, so let me go to the first question that I see. The first one is, how can you see if your Google customer success stories submissions have been received and approved? Let me come back to my screen so you can see me a little bit more. So this is a good question. I think what the best method to get an answer is to send a question to your reseller console, and your channel manager has contacts in the marketing team, so they can check up on your status. The information you All right, sorry, I'm not sure what happened. I think there was another technical meltdown. I saw somebody write a question that the Hangout seems to have gone down, so, and then people +6 that one. So apologize for the technical difficulties. It seems like you can't have a great webinar without a little bit of a hiccup. So I'm going to continue on to the next question that I saw earlier, which was, when I mean a domain such as googleapps.domain.com, is this correct or incorrect? And it's hard to tell sometimes if the Google Apps portion is part of the primary, secondary, or tertiary part of the domain. But usually domain.com is the primary one, and then Google Apps could act as a landing page, a sub page, or a reseller domain. So if it's acting as a landing page or a second page on their home screen or from their home website, then that definitely is a violation. So if you see these happening, please let us know. The best way that we find out about these violations is through you. We trust that this community is going to do this responsibly and professionally, but we do appreciate your diligence and your watch here. So hopefully that answers your question. Next one is the GEC page for pitching success stories seems to have a broken link. Can you verify when this will be available? So this is a great reminder. We did have this notification come up earlier this week, and we're trying to fix this as soon as possible. It should be back and solved by the end of the week or early next week. So hopefully you can have an opportunity to submit more of your customer success stories very soon. Great. So I read Google Apps resellers are to be renamed Google Apps Service Partners. When will that change happen? This is a great question. Something that we announced at the Partner Summit in February earlier in the year, as well as on our blog post officially. So we're very excited about this change, and I really want to emphasize that this is going to happen. And although we don't have an exact date, because at Google we don't like to share dates that we are 100% certain about, it is coming because it is a big priority for us. So keep a lookout for that change, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of notifications and a lot of updates about how this will affect you. Cool. The next question I see here is, I don't have a large marketing budget. What can I do to increase my ROI? Excellent question, Mara. I hear this a lot, and if you're not a company that's coming in with a big budget, which is completely normal and expected, you want to maximize your dollars, and there's a ton of different initiatives out there. So how do you spend your money wisely to get the most impact, so then you can create more sales, get more budget, and then have bigger events? So the first suggestion I have is avoid high-cost initiatives, such as big spending on AdWords and big in-person events. So for AdWords, I know Google Apps, reseller, Gmail, partner, all of those keywords are very expensive. When you do cost per impression and cost per click, cost per action, they can all vary. And what I'd hate to see is you creating this elaborate campaign, forgetting that it's live, and then you're just spending a lot of money without optimizing it. So if you can avoid big ad spend on AdWords, that would be one of my first suggestions. Secondly is to avoid in-person events. Trust me, I've run my own events previously, and one of the reasons that we stopped doing these was it's hard to measure ROI, and they're very costly up front. Now, I do think that if you can afford this quarter, next quarter, and the next year to do an event, whether it's small or local, you should take the opportunity to do so. The people you meet, some of the stuff that you learn is pretty invaluable. But if you can't do that in the near term, that's definitely okay. With all the catering, the food, the venue, the setup, the time, the planning, it takes a lot of effort. So take all of those resources and invest it in something like SEO optimization or virtual events. So with search engine optimization, if you're not familiar with what it is, you're optimizing your website to be crawled by search engines. So your keywords, all of your taglines, your headers are appropriate so that once people search for you, you will come up as the top organic search. Let's say if you're not doing SEM, which is search engine marketing. Search engine marketing is just a fancy word for advertising. So all the sponsored ads on the top of, let's say, a Google screen at the top or on the right-hand side, that is considered SEM. And then I mentioned previously about virtual events. If you can't do live events, do virtual events, whether that's with webinars, in-person trainings, or sales meetings. Those are going to be a lot more cost efficient for you. So if you do those, my biggest suggestion there is to have good content. The biggest no-no and what I would say please avoid is to do webinars for the sake of having webinars. One of the handles that we have a lot of pride in is our Twitter handle for Google Enterprise. We have a really dedicated user base and followers, so we have new content coming in every day, multiple times a day. Even though they're short snippets, it's new. And if you have that same perspective and that same priority, you'll have a good habit of creating new content that's useful for your customers. All right, the next question I see is, have many people been having difficulties accessing PST, the Partner Sales Tool? The Partner Sales Tool is not in my scope or in my role to work on. That's my counterparts in the sales team. So if you do come across any difficulties with accessing PST, contact your channel manager or fill out a support ticket within your reseller console. We'll have somebody respond within a few days, if not sooner than that. But if you can't access PST, that is not a good thing. So please get that ticket filed, and we'll try to fix that right away. All right, talking about Google Learning videos, is it possible to change the language and add at the end of the video the logo of the customer without changing anything, since some of them are in English? I'm not 100% sure which Google Learning videos you're talking about, but I'm pretty sure, if I had to guess, you're talking about some of our support and training videos, and then you want to change and edit the video at the bottom or at the end to change the call to action. So if you're changing the video to make it for having it basically represent you, that's not available and not possible right now, just because the videos that are being made right now are specifically made for, I guess, direct customers or for our partners to leverage, either to educate yourself or your customers. But if you start changing up the video and the content and then reposting it on YouTube, we don't want that to look like it's coming from you or misrepresenting Google Apps. So even though they are in English, I would highly suggest instead to take some of the content and make your own videos. That's the best way to kind of use what's already out there without recreating the wheel. All right, so thank you so much for all your questions. I think we've exhausted all of them in the list, and plus we've already reached time. I know the 30 minutes went by really quickly for me. Apologize again for the the hiccup that happened in the middle of the presentation. Thank you to those of you who still remained on the line. So we hope that you found this really valuable. We are going to post this video back on GEC within the next few hours. So stay tuned. Make sure you share this with the rest of the folks on your team. And good luck and happy marketing. Thanks.